Hey y'all, thanks for clicking on this video. It's going to be a little bit different where I'm doing a lot more long form videos like this. And going into 24 season, I'm doing a lot more tournaments. I have over 10 tournaments I'm participating in all across the state. And for me, I want to get a little bit better. And so I decided to do kind of a read and react on the practice times that I go out when I go out fishing, and kind of show you guys what's going through in my mind and kind of share that with you. Plus, it gives me an opportunity to look into how I was fishing and what I did and how I broke down this body of water, this piece of body of water, and so I can improve on it going forward. So this is just going to be really uncut, really raw footage that you'll see. And I'll have some slides that you'll see in the video. But for me, I have a hard time figuring out where fish go when, especially during the winter, because that's not my biggest cup of tea, per se. So here in Texas, we're kind of finally entering into the winter season. And that's when it really gets starting to get cooler, especially going into February. I think this week, we'll start seeing lows of 10 degrees. And so the fishing at this point to the end of February is going to be a little bit tougher. But my first tournament, though, is the beginning of March. And so me practicing now, I'll be able to kind of find a pattern on what works, especially on this body of water that I'll get to in a minute. But at least I'll know kind of what to do. And so my first tournament this year is at Lake Ray Roberts, and this is actually my home lake. I'm the closest to it. And for me, I haven't really bass fished a lot there. I fished a lot of other fish species out there, but bass fishing is not something I really go target. And I haven't been all to different places on Lake Ray Roberts. And so my first fishing trip was last Saturday on the 6th of January, and I never even been to this spot to fish before, let alone, again, bass fish. And so I wanted to put myself into something that's a little bit more unfamiliar, while also trying to learn. And so, but by doing all these things, I'll be increasing my time on the water, which also increases the amount of potential fish catches that I'll have during a tournament session, but also I'll be able to move with a purpose, because when you're kayak fishing, you're kind of just always going. But you're moving not as fast as if I had a bass boat, but as if I wish to do that. Anyway, so again, went to Ray Roberts midday, and I'll be looking down at kind of my notes here, but you'll be kind of seeing that on screen as well too. And so at Ray Roberts, the week prior, it had a lot of rain. I was out of town, so it was a little bit difficult for me to gauge from that. And I kind of did do a little bit of pre-fishing, but not as much as I normally would. And let me take another step back too. So for each tournament, I'll try to do some of these read and reacts for the tournament, but also we'll try to do a read and react long form video like this for each practice session. So it allows me again to learn more about what I'm doing. So when I do map study, which will be totally separate from this, or on the water type of read and reacts, but map study, I'll be able to kind of figure out where to go and all that. All these places, they're public knowledge. All the competitors that are going to be competing in these tournaments with me, they know what to do. And so I'm not really afraid of sharing what I feel about it, because number one, I want to grow the sport and show and teach people kind of my learning experience. Because for me, I've been fishing all my life, but I haven't been bass fishing all my life though. I mean, I've always caught bass, but just not targeted in this form and fashion in a tournament setting. And so I'm not really too afraid of doing that. I may or may not do the map study videos, just due to the fact that that's really nitty gritty details, but maybe. But at least these things will, you can kind of put it together. But locations and all this stuff is public knowledge. No one owns the water anyway. So anyway, just want to get that out there. But anyway, back to Ray Roberts and his current conditions. I was out of town. I didn't do a lot of map study, but I knew that it was raining a lot. And so the current official fishing report on Ray Roberts is that the bass were slow, and they're wanting to use more shad imitation baits, so like a Alabama rig or swim bait or jerk bait. Now, last year, trying to see what happened, we're a little bit cooler. We're actually not a little bit cooler. We're actually a little bit warmer than last year. But at that time, around that time, basically about the same, and the water was a little bit clear. And I'll get to the location and what that looks like in a minute. But it was also slow. And for me, I'm thinking that winter bass fishing is going to be slow no matter what. We're not going to catch a lot of numbers, but we're going to catch really quality bass. And so that's kind of what I was really focused on. So I kind of knew that anyway. I knew kind of where, just from crappie fishing, there are so many times, I kind of know what depth that the fish are going to be at and where the bait's going to be. But again, never been to this location before. And that location was at Pecan Creek. That's on the northern end of the lake. Never been there, never even seen it. And so I had a little bit of a later start, but that's okay because in winter bass fishing, you want it to be a little bit more warmer. That's when there's going to be a little bit more active fish. Again, please chime in the comment section if you're wrong, if you feel like I'm wrong. But for me, it's not going to make a big make or break or anything like that. I had a good amount of time on the water to kind of come to some solid conclusions. And then it was mostly sunny. It had some good cloud covers here and there, but and it wasn't too windy. The air temp was around 39, 50 degrees, water temp 48, 49 degrees. Pretty stable conditions so far. Honestly, this feels like a fall day to me, but you're knowing full well that we're entering into the winter season. Side note too is the week prior, yes, there was a cold front, so they should have been a little bit more active. But the interesting thing is that didn't really occur. Again, I'll kind of touch on that in a little bit. And so I kind of had 4 places that, or at least 2 places, or types of covers and structures. Those are kind of combos and I see cover and structure as a 2-in-1. You know, like I want to go find some sort of cover that's on, or some sort of cover that's on this type of structure on the body of water. Again, I did a little bit of pre-fishing to kind of see what Pecan Creek has, just in my abilities to kick to a certain spot and get there. And so Pecan Creek doesn't have a lot of timber. It does have a lot of timber, but not a lot like other parts of the lake. And I also knew that there's riprap around there, just around the boat ramp, and then also going on a northern side of the lake, or northern side of Pecan Creek. And then there's a lot of structure. You're really close to actually the river, or the Trinity River going through Ray Roberts. And then also there's plenty of different creeks, Pecan Creek, where I can target some drop-offs as well too. And then there's some ditches where there's enough pockets where I can get into a ditch. You'll kind of see some of those video clips as I put them on screen, where I worked a few different baits. So initially when I tied on, I had a square bill on there. Specifically, I had a Mega Bass Sonic side. And the reason why I tied that on is I want something that has a little bit tighter wobble to it. I didn't want something to swing too wide because I didn't know how, again, the bass were going to react. So I wanted to go a little bit more conservative on that approach. Plus, with that bill, it doesn't have that wide bill, so it also makes the wobble a little bit tighter. But also, once it hits timber or rocks, it kind of bounces off really fast comparison to if I just had a plastic clear bill crankbait. It's just going to kind of just bounce off of it, but not really spring out of its bounce, if that makes sense. I also had a swim bait on there. I had a 6-inch mag draft I didn't throw my 8-inch, but wanted to throw the 6-inch, wanted to try to see if I can get something there. Bass, there's a philosophy where some people think that you want to throw something really big because they're going to have one meal and make it worthwhile for them to eat it. A 6-inch is kind of a good happy medium. It's not, super big, but it's a larger style bait in comparison to what I was throwing before. Obviously, I threw the jerk bait out there. You'll see me throw the jerk bait. I'm not going to show all the clips or the whole footage of me fishing, but you'll kind of get a general idea of what I was doing. But I threw a Mega Bass Vision 110 Plus, or Vision 110 Junior Plus 1, so it kind of gets around 7 to 8 feet of water or so. And my goal was to get it at least into those middle third, or that bottom, or those fish that were kind of right off the bottom. And for bass, I know that they're going to be the most active if they're not just sitting on the bottom, belly down, but those are kind of a little bit riding up. They're not in that middle part of the water column. Good luck trying to catch those. Granted, there's new techniques that, like the hover stroll, that'll catch them, but it's going to be pretty tough to catch suspended fish like that. And definitely, those are on top, just ones that are just kind of roaming. It's going to be kind of tough. But that jerk bait and where I wanted to target and what I'm good at, I'm good at fishing from around 20 feet and up. And mainly, if you want my money maker right now is probably about 10 to 15 feet of riprap. That's what I'm really good at. I'm really good and I'm comfortable with that. But anyway, I wanted to get that jerk bait as far down, as deep as possible as I could, to target those fish that were in that middle third, or again, they're not on the bottom, but they're not in the middle of the water column, but just kind of in the bottom, middle third, and then they can attack it up once I hit timber and stuff. Plus, that Vision 110, it suspends pretty well. It doesn't float up pretty fast, doesn't float down pretty fast either. It really does a good job just staying still. So when I jerk it one time like I usually do, let it soak for a little bit, and then jerk it a couple times here and there, I was expecting a bite. And then the hover stroll, I kind of touched on that a little bit too. For those that if I just ran across a whole bunch of fish that are just middle third, or where I threw the hover stroll was in the main creek or in the river channel, and there was a ton of fish that were sitting on underwater timber. Excuse me. And so I just cast out to it, and I'll kind of tell you what I should have done. I spent a little more time doing that, but a little bit something different, like throwing the finesse jig. So you'll see this in the video how I was throwing the finesse jig, but I was throwing it in a way where I was throwing it towards timber, but not around it or underwater. So again, this is just my, my best opinion on it is anytime, and this is just for fish, anytime fish are just locked on, covered, like locked on, they're typically not going to be the most active. But whenever fish are they're on structure, but they're kind of around it, they are active. So these are, again, the margin of knowing either or is pretty slim, but you see this a lot in crappie fishing too when you go on bridge piles. When they're just locked onto something, they don't want to eat. But when they're kind of off a little bit, or they're up off the timber or something, or off the bridge piling, or off this rock, then they are in hunt mode. And so what I was doing with that finesse jig was pitching it right at the base. Now, sometimes this technique works. You'll see a lot of people talk about that at Caddo or other places, or Fork. A lot of places that traditionally have a lot of timber, and they throw Cinco or some sort of plastic worm, something that soaks, right? They throw it to the base of that piece of cover, and they usually get a bite. Sorry, it's my dog. But they usually throw it right at the base, and they usually get a strike. But sometimes that's not the case, and I think that was the case on my timeout, because I kept on throwing this finesse jig right at the base, but there was something a little bit different that, looking on the film don't lie. Looking at the film, I should have done, but didn't. And then also I had a Texas rig rigged on, a Texas rig on my jig pole. Instead of putting a curly tail or a grub or anything like that, what I did was put a Senko on it, a 5-inch Senko. Because I didn't know, again, don't know how active they are, what they want, so I just went kind of the more conservative route. Again, that's what's most comfortable for me, is to go that way. I could be missing fish, I don't know, but for me, I have found more success when I'm in these bass tournaments, going a little bit more conservatively. A great example of that is the tournament that I won out at Amon and Carter. Went practice there twice, and the 2 times I went out there on both sides of the lake, I was power fishing, trying to use my crankbaits and lipless, and then also my square bill out there, right on riprap. Again, that's what's most comfortable for me. By the time I got to some docks, right, that's also one to throw power fishing to the docks. Didn't catch a lick, but what worked though was, again, going to what's more comfortable with me was a wacky worm, and that's where I caught my winning fish, was in there, in those docks, under shade, and off a riprap. And so, for me, it's just kind of a numbers game, in my opinion. I'm gonna get those trophy fish, and that's gonna come. I mean, you put this much time in, you put this much thought in, and this is just not even a lot. I mean, there's more people who do a lot more, but just the beginning of really going into this, for me, that's what's most comfortable. Not to say that I need to get uncomfortable and try something new, because I'm definitely down for that too. But I can't be a jack of all trades. And so, anyway, the big key though for me was to get into those channel drop-offs. Right? I know that that's where they're going to be. If I can find rock or underwater timber or timber that I can see, and especially if it was cedar trees, which hold a lot of fish at Ray Roberts. If I can find that, then we'll be in good shape. So, but what in the world happened? Sorry for the clicks and all that. We'll eventually get a little bit better system and an actual mic holder for this thing. But anyway, what happened? So I eventually found fish around 10 to 20 feet of water near the key structure. For me, I personally use size scan 2D in my maps a lot. I look at my maps probably more than actual imagery, but the 2D kind of confirms what I see in the size scan. And that's when I'm actively fishing. When I'm not scanning, but when I'm just casting and actively fishing, I have size scan on top, I have a maps on the bottom, and 2D on the other side of the bottom. That's what's comfortable for me. Especially now, if I'm standing still, I have different screens for that. But anyway, I found fish where they were, where I thought there would be. Now, what went wrong though? Right? I didn't get a bite when I was out there. I saw fish, didn't see a bite though. So one, and I have this little bit flip-flop, they weren't actually chasing bait. So that's something that I should have taken into account, where I needed to slow down, right? Have the different wrong reaction baits. And there's actually 2 things about why I had a different reaction bait, or the wrong reaction bait. So those, looking back, I had a square bill, jerk bait, and I had the swim bait too. those are kind of my reaction baits to get them to do something, right? They're moving baits, right? Reaction, just something moving, right? So the square bill. Now, when I was throwing that square bill, I'm casting towards those fish, right? You'll see this kind of in the clips. These are times when I'm casting. I already went by these places too, by the way, but so I kind of knew where they were. So I'm casting towards these fish, right? But the square bill only went down, again, 7-8 feet of water. Yeah, that's my dog again. 7-8 feet of water, but it wasn't deflecting off of anything, right? Now, later in the day, I threw a 5XD. I don't have I still want to pull the clip of that, just due to where I was fishing. But threw a 5XD, something that got to that 15-foot range, because they were really kind of hugged up on the bottom. And that's when I finally was, nudging against rocks and timber and stuff. So looking back, when I was trying to find a reaction strike just to see if there was something there, and to make sure that there wasn't carp or drum or something like that, should have threw something a little bit deeper cranking and spent a little bit more time doing that. Additionally, the swim bait. Now, I threw the swim bait parallel to me, bombing casts and stuff, and I kind of, sometimes I had to let it sink as far as down as I could. Sometimes I kind of had it in that bottom third, and this was around 10 to 15 feet of water, and kind of changed my retrieves up a little bit. Sometimes I was kind of just doing just a steady retrieve. Sometimes I just literally just let it hit the bottom, try to slow roll it, which is kind of dangerous with an open treble hook like that on there, because I didn't have a freestyle. But that didn't work either, because again, they didn't want that. And that should have, the first hour and a half of me really throwing those two, plus the jerkbait, which I'll talk about in a second, should keep me into throw the jig more. Then also threw the jerkbait though. I'll get to the jig in a second. Threw the jerkbait, and my dog again. Threw the jerkbait, and I did that in ditches mainly. I threw sometimes jerkbait around the banks like I was, again, where I'm comfortable at, and threw it a couple times in the towards the river channel. But when I was throwing that jerkbait in those ditches, I saw a lot of fish there too, in the most bait and pockets. But again, I didn't have that jerkbait get deep enough to where that underwater timber was. I was assuming, hey, they'll just kind of they'll see this and they'll kind of get to it. Now, muddy and stained water like it was at Ray Roberts, especially where I was, I should have known better to do something like that. It might have been still a good idea if it was a little bit more, maybe warmer or something, or did this in the morning or earlier. But going back to another time where I was tournament fishing, throwing a jerkbait, I threw a jerkbait. Now, that might have been probably the only one I know for sure in the area where I was at Lake Fork back in October. But from just listening to the awards, I must have caught maybe 8-10 bass off of jerkbaits, two or three of which, I caught. The other 5 or whatever, there's a video on that. That's just really disappointing. But could have definitely that tournament. Looking back, I'm still a little salty on that because I could have at least walked away with some money. But here nor there, live and learn. But when I was throwing that jerkbait out in probably the same depth of water, again 10 to 20 feet of water, every time I got a bite, the first thing was I hit a piece of timber out there, and then they struck at it. And so I didn't do that here. Now I threw 2 different jerkbaits, but for some reason I just wasn't confident enough to throw that bait out there. Some of that was just because I'm scared. Again, past experience doesn't mean that it's going to happen again, because I honestly didn't want to lose that jerkbait during practice like I did during the tournament, because I threw it into very compromising positions. But you know, that it was a big risk, me doing that, for a big reward. And because everyone else was throwing something, they're throwing all jackhammers or jigs, and I was the only one catching a whole bunch of them off jerkbaits, and good sized ones. But anyway, but that was kind of the thing. I was throwing the wrong one, not the wrong bait, I should say, but just the wrong. It didn't give a reaction that I needed, and so if I had maybe a Vision 110 plus 2, I might have gotten a little bit deeper with the setup that I had. If I threw maybe the 5XD or just a crankbait in general that got into 10 to 15 feet, because now that I know, okay, there's a lot more timber that I could see that I could not see on Google Earth. If I would have thrown something like that, change the bait out, put it on, and get it hung up a couple times, excuse me, I think I might have done a little bit better. But this kind of goes into the jig. Now, for some reason, just looking at the video, I did a lot of hopping of the jig, right? Now I'm comfortable with throwing the jig, but again, this is just that inexperience of wintertime fishing. I have to turn my spring, summer, sometimes fall brain off and turn it on to wintertime, because me hopping it like that, like as if I'm hopping it around boulders, right, or rocks off riprap, they didn't want that. They didn't want that action. Plus, I'm throwing it towards timber, right? And I just wanted to get that finesse jig stuck. Well, again, I'm casting towards fish, but I'm hopping it. I'm giving a little bit too much action, or not the action they want. What I didn't do was sit there, cast it, let it soak, get all the way down to the bottom, and then start pulling it so I can find that structure. I wish I took a screenshot of what I saw, but there was a big boulder in a certain area, and there was probably about 2-3 fish just sitting right there on 2D sonar. Again, now I'm casting it with square bill, but I never even thought about, okay, yeah, I need to go throw this jig and drag it towards those boulders and some of this timber where it was, and just see if they can go find it. Didn't do that. Now, as I go back, and that's kind of the purpose of these videos, is going back, that's going to be a main technique, along with some of the reaction baits. So that jig, especially that Texas rig that I rarely threw that day, I'll be definitely trying to search for bait. Additionally, like I said, when I was out there, I looked at looking at the 5 hours I was out there, or actually on the water. I didn't spend a lot of time where number one thing was I wanted to key off of river and creek channels, but didn't do a lot of that. Excuse me, didn't do a lot of that. I got computers going off and everything, but didn't do a lot of that. Ideally, once I find a creek channel or a ditch, especially in these two positions, a lot of it at Ray Roberts, which is why I'm not too afraid of sharing some of this, because it's clear as day if you go on Navionics or whatever mapping service you want to use, was I should have casted towards those drop-offs where I saw the most fish, right, and just start dragging it and have the fish kind of get down to it, just like if they're trying to find a crawdad. Didn't do that. Additionally, again, throwing a different type of reaction bait, so something a little bit different. Now, if I had to go back and have the same baits and everything, is for me, because I like that 10-20 feet about 30 to 40 feet away from the bank. That's kind of that's my bread and butter, what I like. I do a lot of, again, parallel casting. Now, there wasn't a lot of riprap, but there was a good amount. And even the rocky banks, they have rocks, but not a lot. It wasn't like, you're going across the dam. We're going perpendicular. Once you find where they are, what depth and all that, it's easy. But what I have to learn to do is to fish kind of like in a semicircle, right? Casting towards the bank with the square bill, letting it come down, right? All right, they're not there. Then cast another, change the angle up a little bit. All right, cast it all the way down until I get, working from perpendicular all the way to parallel, right, towards the bank, and then keep moving. So I'm getting probably 3-4 cast off in a semicircle fashion. Then I can find out, okay, what angle do they want it at? 1, and then 2, to see what depth they are at that point. Then I can say, okay, now I know what the depth is. Now I can start working parallel. I can't just work parallel immediately. You get a lot more area coverage doing that. But when you're fishing a spot where you're trying to find certain pieces of cover within this structure that you're working, you can't do that, right? Because these are this is very isolated here and there type of structures I'm targeting, not long distances, 100 yards worth of it. This is only 20 yards worth of structure. And so, but if I can focus more on those isolated targets in a jig, that I'll be able to do that. The one wasn't really blowing that hard either, but if I was able to do that, I think I would have found what I need to find. Now, there's a lot of guys who are fishing larger swim baits, and I'm still going to throw that swim bait, but they're throwing bigger size swim baits, glide baits, and they're fishing the same way I like to fish too. They're fishing from 0 all the way to 40 feet off the bank in this 10 to 20 foot zone, right? 10 less, they're not going to be on there, but they're fishing in areas where it gets warm, right? Where there are active, so they can throw some reaction bait. It just so happens that this place where I fished that day, mind you, didn't have a lot of moving fish that were in that water column to throw, something like that. There were some pretty big fish, but I can't change how they want to eat that day, right? I wanted to get them to get a big bite off of a reaction bait, knowing full well this is probably going to come off the bottom, and not hop in it either. So I'm still pretty confident about the place, but there wasn't a lot of activity. We'll see. I might go back to it. There'll be another. I know I have planned at minimum 2 more times I'll be out there before the tournament, but that's all I really have about this read and react. I know I need to focus a little bit more on just focusing on my keys. Hey, you know where fish are? Hey, let's go work it. Let's go through the list. Let's go to A. If A doesn't work, let's go to B. If B doesn't work, let's try A again, but a little bit differently. And so I still have a lot of confidence. I'm not too discouraged that I didn't find a fish, catch a fish, get a bite, whatever. Because that's the name of the game, especially putting myself in a situation like this where, I never particularly been there before. And so even though it is my home lake, never really seen it. And now that I know, okay, here's where they kind of are. This is what I need to do going forward. And so I'm still looking forward to the next practice session. I really want to go to some different places, some different lakes, and I'll still be able to do that going forward. I have a jam-packed schedule, and so hopefully these videos, or this video, and the ones that will come after this, you guys like. but a little bit longer, really not so much edited to look pretty and stuff like that, but this is the nitty-gritty detail, not really nitty-gritty detail, but a little bit more detail into the mind that what I'm thinking and kind of journaling, on through video, what I'm doing. And so I can be more successful because I can't go from being, hey, I'm a fisherman, been fishing all my life. I got a lot of raw skills. So for me, and that's where the challenge is going to come in. It's just like you just know the feeling of what to do and stuff. But bass are a little bit different animal. So I can't rely on techniques and just experience for getting close to, honestly, getting close to 20 plus years of just fishing. Truly fishing, not just, me with a, Barbie or a Superman pole or something like that, but really fishing and being taught a certain way, in different conditions and all that. And then be able to be successful. This is a different type of beast. So it's going to take, but the more deposits I put in, I truly believe that. The more deposits I put in, the more hours I put in, I'll be tracking that for goals. It's just, because that is one of my goals, is to get to a certain number of hours studied. And I see that. The times I've gone and practiced the most, I've been I've placed at a higher positions in the finished higher, but also had just a better time in the water. And so again, I'll be doing a little bit more about this, probably doing some map study with y'all and kind of just general ideas, but more so is like, okay, taking what you see on YouTube and Instagram and all that, and baits, because at the end of the day, it don't really matter. It does matter, but not really. It's just kind of where to go, how to go get fish. That's what I want to see. I want to see that. And hopefully you guys will too. So anyway, I'm going to sign off. But yeah, hopefully see you on the water. Peace.